Hello everyone
Hello.
and welcome. I am Selda Sekinli from Istanbul Atlas University, Faculty of Health Science from Nursing Department. It is my pleasure to open our panel titled Regional Signs of Climate Change and Environmental Disruptions. In this part of conference, our panelists will share key insights and real-world challenges from their perspective fields. Their talks will cover four broad areas: community and public health, indigenous perspectives, hospital and outpatient practices, and nursing education. Our first speaker is Professor Stephen Wright. And before inviting Professor Stephen, I would like to introduce briefly. Professor Wright began his career in nursing in 1970 and went on to become the first consultant nurse in NHS in 1986. He built an international reputation through teaching, research, media work, and advising organizations such as World Health Organization and the Royal College of Nursing with a focus on the care of older people. In the mid 1980s, he shifted towards spirituality and health, co-founding the Sacred Spade Foundation to support carers and teach healing practices. He is a fellow and visiting professor at the University of Cumbria. Professor Wright, it's your time.
Thank you, Zelda. Thank you for that. I'm really impressed by me, that introduction, all those qualifications. As you read, my history in nursing is long in the tooth, so I've seen many changes. What I'd like to begin with in the next few minutes is set out a few propositions. First of all, I'm thinking of the words of the poet W.B. Yeats, the Irish poet, that famous poem that's become very fashionable for these times, where the second coming says things fall apart, the center cannot hold. And there is the sense at the moment globally that things are falling apart. And it's not just a sense, it's a reality. The French researchers have coined the term collapse. And the idea of collapse is not an event, it's a process that's going on. And we're witnessing it at many levels now globally. So, and what that results in, and has resulted in my own country in the UK, is an increasing inclination to try and find people to solve problems for us, a nostalgic approach, populist leaders, or hedonism. And it's all rooted in a global climatic change, which is unique in modern human history and is driving everything else. So although we focus on political, economic, social, and other changes, the roots lie in an enormous global change that is taking place and is going to continue. And what it's doing, it's decentering people, decentering us from our contribution to the world. What it terms that's practically causing is we're seeing climate shifts that are producing increasing risk of floods, increasing risks of droughts in the northern hemisphere, the rise of illnesses like malaria moving off. But above all and overarching them are, I think, two illness phenomena that arises when people get scared. One is rising levels of mental health problems, particularly anxiety and depression. And second, rising levels of autoimmune problems like cancer and heart disease. Because when people get scared, what Candy Pert called the psychoneuroimmunology effect, is when we're scared, it has a slow depressing effect on the immune system. So what's happening is we are going to see rising levels in the next few decades of diseases like cancer, autoimmune diseases, and the like, because our immune systems, individually, collectively, are getting suppressed. And of course, nurses are part of that. Nurses too are going to have mental health problems. Nurses too are going to have autoimmune health problems. We're caught up in that. So how do we work through it? Well, if we look, one of the advantages of nursing is we're everywhere. We're all over the place. And if the crisis that's going on, one of the first challenges for nurses is to become aware of it and not fall into patterns of denial or populism. But the advantage of our input everywhere is enormous. The secondly, if it demands of nurses enhanced counseling, psychotherapeutic qualities, skills that can help people feel better, even in the midst of crisis. Why should that matter? Well, if we look at the evidence, if you're dealing with anxiety that's causing mental health and physical illness problems, then anything you can do that makes people feel better takes the brakes off the immune system and therefore helps general physical and mental health improve, or at least we handle crisis situations better. So those are some of the key elements to me and the changes that are going on. I think we need to be realistic that it's going to get worse. That's one of the unique things about the current crisis is whether it's a matter of 5 years or 20 years ahead. If we look at the works of Jem Belden and Pablo Sevigny in France, for example, where they talk, where sort of the early studies talking about what was called collapse, it's going to affect huge numbers of people globally. One thing it's doing, of course, is making people move. So we are seeing more and more people trying to get to countries like this, which are relatively safe, in order to simply live well when they can no longer survive in their own countries, in part driven by climate changes, in part then that produce more conflict where people are. So what I'd like to suggest then is that if this sense of no longer having a center, both in ourselves and in the culture in which we live, because things are destabilized, what about nurses ourselves in this? I would see several things in which nurses may be drawn to participate in order both to continue and survive ourselves in an uncentered world by creating those qualities that center ourselves. Hence, when we talk about centering and becoming aware of yourself and how you function in the world, how you find meaning and purpose in a distraught world, that's the stuff of spirituality. So I would argue one of the long neglected areas of nursing is spiritual inquiry for ourselves, not just for patients and those who use our services. So there is that demand upon nurses is to look more inwardly also, to look at our interior and say, what the hell is going on with me that I need to develop in order to sustain myself and build resilience in a really changing and challenging world. The second would be is what we tend to do is nurses have a really good track record of trying to fix everything for everybody. We have very high levels of burnout because our boundaries are so poor. Is helping us to focus much more on where's my bit of commitment. We see all this global stuff going on and we want to fix it for everybody. Instead, where we look for what I would call your pressure point, where is the bit that I can help? And maybe all we need to do in this catastrophizing world is just value the bit that we're doing already, that we're doing well. We don't need to go beyond that. Secondly, is within that is how nurses care for ourselves. We have a poor track record for that, not just the inside work, but making sure we set our boundaries clearly and taking our time out. And lastly is recognizing within this a quality of kinship that if the world is becoming uncentered, it's affecting all of us. The kind of person that I am is the kind of person that everybody else is, and the world beyond it. We've lived for centuries under the Cartesian thinking of human beings being separate from the rest of reality, from the rest of the world, and therefore able to exploit it as we wish. I think if we cultivate amongst nurses what something is inherent in nursing through our compassionate caring for the other is myself, not just persons, but also the whole of life, recognizing that all of life, that kinship is there, which if we are to save the planet, is going to be a very important feature of it, recognizing that in you is me and in me is you. So, in closing with those few minutes, I would say the future does indeed look gloomy. We are having to deal with profound feelings now as the world seems to disintegrate, of grief, of guilt, of hopelessness, of sorrow, of anger. Very powerful feelings are being unleashed in ourselves and everyone else. And those will all be part of the nursing matrix with greater intensity in the future if we're to be playing our part in helping the world to find its center again, which will be a different center. The law of Nightingale famously said, the law of God is against repetition. things are going to be different. It's never going to be the same again. But we need to find our way in this new world, what part we will play in it, and what this new centre for us all it will be. Thanks for listening. Hope I've not gone over time, Zelda.
Thank you. Right. Thank you so much for your presentation. And our next speaker is Lucy Brown. She joined the Center for Sustainable Healthcare in March 2024 and now serves as Development Director, leading partnerships and business development. She is also head of sustainability at Circle Health Group, driving carbon reduction across 54 hospitals. Now it's your time, Lucy.
Thank you very much, and thank you so much for the opportunity and to the team. I'm here just to provide some practical kind of examples of how nurses get involved. And following on from Stephen's brilliant kind of introduction, I love this visual, and I think it's something that really summarises what's coming ahead. So as Stephen rightly said, we're looking at the impact on the mental health and those anxieties. That's going to be fairly significant for all of us. But all of these areas will be impacted as well. And as we can see, there's obviously intrinsic links between our health and the health of the planet. I think we all know that, but that's just a really good diagram, and I'd urge you to share that with your colleagues and family, just to see actually where things are going to be impacted and what's coming ahead. And I've summarised some of the things I've noticed from my practice and from colleagues that I've worked with to help you, but also for you as nurses and midwives, what you can do to learn more. So there's lots of information, but that obviously this will be shared with you, and I would urge you to look at the links and the references I've shared as well. So one of the areas I've focused on is rising temperatures and heat waves. And within the UK, we've certainly seen, particularly in 2025, that it's really encroached on our operations within hospitals. Now, really, it's looked at that theatre cases couldn't go ahead because the safe temperatures couldn't be maintained. We're looking at ward closures. All of those things would be impacted. And it's obviously going to impact on our patients that we're taking care of, those that are most vulnerable, those that are elderly, but also children and those with chronic disease. So most of the people that we look after. Now, what we need to know as nurses and midwives, we need to look at preventative strategies. What can we do? So I'm not going to go through all of this because I've only got a quick 10 minutes, but essentially I would urge you to look at the Society of Acute Medicine pull together a really great health plan for you as nurses and midwives to learn about, which can be used across all countries as well. So I'd urge you to have a look at that. But really we need to educate ourselves, and that's key, as Stephen said as well, educate ourselves on what's coming and how we can support our patients and those that we care for, because we have great influence. As nurses and midwives, there's 29 million of us across the globe, and we touch everybody, all the populations. So we have a real responsibility to learn about this and rapidly and see how we can adapt our practice accordingly. Next, flooding, water contamination, extreme rainfall. We've seen an increased amount of flooding, particularly where I live within the south of England, which has impacted obviously on operations. So we think about hospital sites or clinics or health services being flooded, but it's also the infrastructure around that. It stops people actually being able to access services and access healthcare. So it's something we need to think about, be mindful of. But also thinking about once the flood has receded, the access that people have to contaminants and water contaminants as well. And we've had quite a lot of examples of that. Just draw your attention to Tunbridge Wells, which is in the southeast of England, which actually had contaminated water supply in England, which has never really been heard of. Now we're seeing an increase in gastroenterology illnesses as well as infection prevention. It's something to really, really improve your knowledge and skills. And again, I've put a link there for you to learn more on flooding and advice to the public. What do we need to know as nurses and midwives, and how can we share and impart that knowledge for others to learn? Because we do need to adapt. As Stephen said, it is pretty gloomy, but we have a responsibility to look after our communities, don't we? Share that knowledge. Next area that we're seeing kind of increase, and this does make me quite sad, but we must remember Ella, and I urge you also. This is a 9-year-old girl who lived in London, near the North Circular, which is quite a polluted, heavy road in London. She died of death. She was the first person in our country to have air pollution as her reason for death on her death certificate, and someone we must remember and think about. Now, what we're finding is we're seeing more and more that we're seeing air pollution from vehicles. There's a number of, and that link there will give you more information on that, looking at carbon burning from our vehicles, from all of those areas we can look at, and also from the energy within our homes. There's lots we can do. But I think there's some advice there as well, but we need to understand the links between respiratory illness, cardiovascular disease, and all those areas, and what we need to do as nurses and midwives. We've also seen an increase in wildfires, which has released an awful lot of carbon into our atmosphere, and where I live in the south of England, we actually saw smog across kind of nature areas, and it's depleted our nature and also obviously increased the biodiversity loss as well within our areas. Last year in the UK, we lost over 47,000 hectares were burned through wildfires. Now, wildfires are common. Forest fires are common within the forest ecology, but we are seeing such an increase in that it's having a real impact. So something to be mindful of. So have a read, there's some more evidence there for you, but we must all remember Ella. I must remember her. The next thing we're seeing, and I remember when I first mentioned this, I was doing teaching at some hospitals I work with, and they thought I was a bit crazy, I think, because I was talking about, I can see in years to come we'll have tropical disease clinics. Now, what we're seeing within the UK, is that pathogens and vector-borne insects are moving, as the planet heats up, they're moving away from the equator and they're coming up into Europe. I was fortunate enough to travel across Europe a couple of summers ago, and within Italy, northern Italy had their first case of malaria, which was unheard of. Within Madrid, where I was teaching as well, they saw first case of Congo hemorrhagic disease, which obviously by nature is an African disease. And what we're seeing within the UK, that's what I'm here to present on today, is that we're seeing an increase in vector-borne illnesses. So tick-borne encephalitis and Lyme disease has seen a real explosion within the UK. So things for us to learn about and think about what our communities and our populations are now being subjected to as well. So a link there for you to learn more as well. It's only a short amount of time with you today. Now, I believe wholeheartedly, and I've written a book about it as well because I care so much about it on sustainable nursing, that nurses and midwives can lead the way. As I said earlier, there's 29 million of us. And we're the most trusted profession, that's on the right-hand side of my slide there, trust profession in the world. So we have a responsibility, don't we, to educate and raise awareness. And we start by starting with ourselves and our teams. So a number of organisations in the UK are doing brilliant things, and it would be amiss of me not to mention the Centre for Sustainable Healthcare where I work. We've got a number of networks and free courses, a global free course for all of you to access, all nurses and midwives, nurse associates, enrolled nurses across the globe. The Royal College of Nursing is doing some brilliant work on the Gloves Off campaign. So I urge you to have a look at Queen's Nursing Institute, and the NMC, which is our regulated body as well, and look at all the things that these organisations are doing. But I urge you to have a look. I'd love you to join our networks at CSH as well. Everything's free, open access. We've got a plethora of case studies that you can lift and shift that have been measured in impact as well. So things that you can use within your communities, within your services. And then finally, here's a link to our programs I just told you about. So this is free online courses for all levels of nurses. We've got a tiered approach. It's been kindly funded by the Burdett Trust for Nursing, so many thanks to the team there. But this is open for all of us, and it's 2 years. So we've got a couple of thousand places, and we'd love you all to join us. So please do share it with your colleagues. I'm great for CPD as well, and for your re-registration. That's it from me, because we've only got a short time. Hopefully I'm just to time as well. But a big thank you. If you want to stay in touch, there's my email, I'm on LinkedIn, and all the references I've quoted are on there for you to use and read further as well. But thank you very much for having me. It's been a pleasure. Back to you, Zelda.
Thank you very much, Brown. Then we can pass to Janet. Sarah Willington Fleisgen, she completed her training as a registered nurse. She worked in various departments of professional nursing. She did a master's degree in health services research and design. She worked as a teacher at nursing school. Last year, she switched to the German Nursing Federation to work on a project that promotes the integration of climate change and planetary health into nursing education. Now it's your turn, Sarah.
So I want to talk about this few minutes about the nursing research in planetary health context in Germany and what the situation here. Yeah, as Zelda said, I'm the consultant for sustainability and climate protection at the German Association for Nursing Profession. And yeah, at first, I think most of the things we already said, that how climate change will adapt or affect our health and also the healthcare system. It's mostly the same like in the UK, like Lucy told us. So we have a rising temperatures and increase of diseases, different diseases. So we know that climate change and the associated extreme weather events will cause many costs in the future, because there's more treatment of more diseases and the destruction of infrastructure, and we need and the consequences of climate change will exacerbate the social inequalities also in Germany, and it will make the working conditions more difficult, and also for the healthcare workers. And if we see what the main challenges will be in the context of the healthcare system in Germany, is that in Germany the system is not really prepared for the challenges posed by the climate change. So there will be more heat waves, more flood disasters, more infection diseases, but there's very little knowledge about the interrelationships of climate change and health in the population, and also in the health professions. So the nurses, the doctors do not really know a lot about it because it isn't part of the curricula until today. So it's just through projects that the healthcare professions learn it. Also, there's very little prevention with a focus on climate change in Germany, and we do not have the co-benefits inside. So there's a strong focus on curation in the healthcare system in Germany, and not a lot of prevention. And we have a little research on effective measures against climate change. So we do not really know which measures really will help, and it's just like trying. Yeah. So what the necessary changes in nursing, professional, and research? So we know that work is becoming more stressful for the healthcare professionals, especially for nurses and midwives, and we will have an increasing number of sick people. The clinical pictures will become more complex. There will be new treatments will be necessary, and we need climate-friendly and climate-adaptive actions also in the healthcare system. And we have a greater need for prevention, which will change the field of work. So the way we are working now as nurses in Germany will be the same in the future, but we do not really know how it will look like. So what the problem? So climate change and sustainability and planetary health isn't a mandatory part of nursing education until now. So we do not have to learn about it. Some will learn because there are some schools that are very good at it. There's a lack of clear guidelines on how sustainable care can be implemented in concrete terms. So we do not really know how we can implement it and in which parts we should implement it. So yeah, there's not a lot of research. There's no clear role defined for nursing care in the context of climate crisis, also not for midwives. We barely know, or we barely have studies on how nursing care can best protect vulnerable people. And also we do not know how we can deal with the consequences best of climate change in nursing. So how is our work affecting the situation, and what should we do that we can protect the people best? So we do not really know how we can do this in our healthcare system best. And what are the consequences? So we know from other countries that prevention and advanced nursing roles support sustainable nursing and climate adaptation. We know that, but we do not really have advanced nursing roles in Germany. There are very few nursing roles, advanced nursing roles. So we have to reflect the further development of these nursing roles in the system. So what can advanced practice nurses do, community health nurses do? We do not really have them in Germany, and that's very bad for us. There are just some projects, but not in the whole field. We don't have them there. We have to focus on the research adapting to advanced nursing roles, and also how they can deal with the climate change and what they can provide in the work. Yeah, and we have to focus more on how nursing can act in prevention. So which role can they do, and they take over, that prevention works better in Germany in the healthcare system. And we also have to address the structures that block a sustainable healthcare system, like the focus on curation and on prevention. So we have to do a lot of political work also in Germany, that the structures will change in Germany in the healthcare system. So, like I said, we need a change in nursing roles in Germany, so we can focus on the planetary health. we need to know, or we need to find out that nurses are key players in the maintaining people's health in the context of climate crisis, so that they're the huge resource to use and to affect the health of the people. And we have to focus on the socially relevant role of nursing. So like I said, we have to introduce new professional roles like community health nurses and disaster nurses, and how they can do their role in the system. And they have to be advocates for the specific groups of people in healthcare. And the target group of our care should not only be individual people, but entire vulnerable population groups, so we can care of whole groups. And we need not a performance-related understanding of activities, but we have to see that there is a rising awareness of the connections between activities, health, and the impact on the climate, and we have to bring it all together in our work. And we have to promote and contribute the interdisciplinary collaboration. So we have to develop more effective treatment approaches with also the other professions. Also, we need a change in nursing education. So we do not only imparting knowledge, but we have to teach transformation skills in Germany more. There need to be more climate-related health literacy. So, and climate-protected practice and climate adaptation must be a part of the education training and the curricula in Germany. Like I said, it isn't until now. And we need some like a transformative education. So we have that the nurses on themselves, like Stephen told, we had that they are critical individuals. They can form the system, and we actively ask them to question the processes, And we have more focus on prevention practice in the education, and we have to promote the interdisciplinary collaboration. And planetary health needs to be a cross-sectional task in the education and the research and the development in nursing research. But what's good? So we need to learn that it's not changed by disasters. It's changed by design. And there are some projects that have a focus on this topic on planetary health, like the heat literacy in nursing education. And I'm looking forward that these projects will become more. Thank you very much.
Now, Janet, we can listen you.
Yeah, I think I'll probably overlap with a lot of what Sarah has said already. So what I'm trying to do is outline some of the challenges faced by nurses and nurse educators when trying to introduce planetary health into education. And the key challenges fall into these 5 major areas. Certainly that's what I found. So if we think about evidence, nurse education is underpinned by evidence and wherever this evidence is available. And in the current context, we can draw on evidence that demonstrates the impact of a changing climate. And Lucy's already talked about some of that. And also research highlighting the need for a healthy planet in order to maintain the health of human populations. I imagine many of you have found it a challenge to convey the relevance of planetary health to nurses, to colleagues, and to other health professionals, let alone to patients. So we need to focus on relevance. Building research into nurse education could be a challenge at the best of times, but drawing on research and undertaking our own evaluations will help us to understand the awareness and knowledge our students have of the links between climate and health. And furthermore, research could enable us to develop educational interventions. Assessing the impact of interventions engages students in the issues and can tell us how successful our educational approaches are. Another challenge is how to make the concept of planetary health relevant to clinical practice. And meeting this challenge will enable students and qualified nurses and midwives to make a real difference to health promotion and healthcare. And finally, as we will see from later presentations in the next session, the process of integrating planetary health into the nursing curriculum is not easy. We also need to ensure curricula meets the competencies required by professional bodies. And furthermore, there'll be significant time within nurse education that is allocated to gaining experience in clinical practice. So all of these factors lead to a time-pressured curriculum. We're already seeing the impacts of a changing climate across the world. Weather patterns are changing, resulting in more storm events, flooding and drought. Some impacts are direct, such as injuries and death from flooding, higher death rates due to heat waves and so on. Poor air quality and harmful emissions lead to an increase in related health conditions, and the spread of zoonotic diseases and new viruses are also evident. But many impacts will be indirectly related to a changing climate. For example, droughts leading to food insecurity will result in a more mobile population, creating significant climate refugees, and of course, in a number of areas, this will lead to wars. Much of the evidence of the impacts of climate change present a picture of doom and gloom. However, we can also see opportunities. So another aspect to consider is the evidence that demonstrates how healthy behavior can have a positive impact on the planet. For example, consuming a diet low in meat and dairy leads to better health outcomes for individuals. And a predominantly plant-based diet also reduces the impact of food production on the environment. So this is just one example of the interconnectedness of human and planetary health. It's also apparent that engaging with planetary health issues is essential for continuing to provide appropriate healthcare, and an understanding of how an unhealthy planet impacts on human and non-human animals will enable us to develop more resilient responses to health threats. And this is why it's fundamental that as educators and researchers, we can demonstrate the relevance of planetary health to nurses. We can engage students in discussions about disease threats in the context of public health, for example, by talking about the spread of new viruses as insects start to thrive in areas they were not previously found, as Lucy said earlier. But another thing to consider is the threat to resource availability, such as, for example, lithium batteries used in medical devices. And furthermore, in delivering healthcare, we have a significant impact on the planet. Consider the vast amount of single-use items and how these are disposed of. Significant amounts of clinical waste are incinerated, and this in turn adds to an environmental pollution and global warming, making the connection between item used in everyday clinical practice, where they come from, and how they're disposed of is a very tangible way of demonstrating the relevance of climate change and sustainability to nurses. Human and planetary health are intertwined, and this is reflected in the Sustainable Development Goals. Many of you will already be familiar with these. So our challenge is to emphasize the positive contribution nurses can make in implementing changes that support sustainable development. In order to do this, we require a nursing curriculum that enables this and is fit for future. Another important and relevant link is how planetary health is integral to social justice. As nurses, we care for the most vulnerable and those already living in poverty or living with challenging circumstances, such as living in areas of conflict. And these people will already be more significantly affected by climate change and resource scarcity. Moving on to research, it's helpful to have an understanding of the level of knowledge our students have of climate change and its impact on health. Assessing knowledge and attitudes can provide a baseline to help us develop and deliver appropriate educational interventions. Engaging students in relevant research can promote discussion of the issues, and this can also help identify areas within the curriculum where topics might be explored. For example, research at the University of Plymouth used evidence to develop an educational intervention that was directly related to the clinical setting. To evaluate the session, students' attitudes and awareness were assessed before and following the teaching input, and this helped us to develop further teaching materials. So this slide provides a link to a short YouTube clip demonstrating how we did this. As educators, we cannot simply assume that what we teach is effective. So we also need to undertake research to examine the impact of planetary health education on clinical practice. As we all know, nursing practice can be driven by rituals. New evidence in any topic takes time to filter into clinical settings. Students may be in possession of the latest evidence. However, they often feel unable to challenge colleagues and mentors when they're in the practice setting. So they need both the evidence and the confidence to do this. So how does all of this relate to a patient, and why is this important? One of the more impactful ways to engage students is through a simple case study. So here's one example. A clinical case study session might consider a patient admitted with breathing difficulties. As students take a history, each of these potential causes can be explored in detail, enabling the students to do their own more extensive research into the environmental impacts of human health. And as the case study is developed to consider the treatment options, students could discuss, for example, the use of inhalers and their impact on the environment. A single pressurized metered dose inhaler contains hydrofluorocarbon propellants. In a single inhaler, it can have a carbon footprint of 30 kilograms of carbon dioxide. Inhalers cannot be recycled within household waste, and if they go to landfill, they continue to release propellant gas into the environment. So there are many other examples like this that can engage nurses and encourage them to think about the relationship between planetary and human health. So there are a number of challenges to integrating planetary health into the nursing curriculum, and not everyone is enthusiastic as those of us attending this conference. So here are a few you might want to consider. It's likely that in all countries there will be pressure on a tight curriculum with competing demands on equally important subjects. In order to convince other educators and engage students, the topics will clearly need to be relevant to clinical practice. We also need to think about how we encourage colleagues to develop their own knowledge in this area, and how we support mentors in clinical practice so that they can engage with our climate savvy and enthusiastic students. It takes time to assess the evidence and to develop relevant teaching materials involving students in this endeavour, and gaining feedback from them will help to support future education and develop students as champions. We're very fortunate in being able to include some of our student champions in the next session. This subject is not going away anytime soon. As educators, we can meet these challenges. Our task is to provide interesting, relevant and evidence-based topics that engage students in what is the biggest threat to health that they will face. My continuing enthusiasm for the inclusion of planetary health in nurse education is due to the innovative work of my colleagues around the world and the fantastic engagement of our students, and this will be evident in the subsequent session. Thank you.
Thank you, Janet, and thank you to all our speakers for their valuable contributions. Now we will move on to our concrete sessions, which will take place over the next hour, and the sessions will explore the topics in greater depth. Thank you for your participation.